How to undo the birth of the destruction? How to undo the creation of a Lord Ravager? Those are probably the questions asked by Cyrene to the lost scepter that has been extrapolating countless cycles of Amphorius. Yeah, I think that is what is going on in Amphorius right now. After spending literally half a year wondering how erudition connects to whatever craziness that's been going on the planet, I think I found the answer in the 3.3 quest. Everything has fallen into place now with the scepter and that girl named Cyrene at the center of it all. But before we continue, how was your Cypher's pull? If your luck is like mine, you probably still don't have her and are running out of Stellar Jades to bring the cat home. Well, LD Shop might be able to help you there. LD Shop is a top-up service where you can make in-game purchases at a discount. All you need to make a purchase is your game server and your ID, and then your top-up will be sent to you within minutes. If you still have your top-up bonus after the anniversary reset and are wondering if it applies in LD Shop, yes it does, so top up there and get your bonus for cheaper. Also, if you spend over $80, you'll get a VIP membership that comes with a free supply pass. So, if you're a spending player and looking to bring the cat home or even to stock up for the deliverer, use my link in the description below to make your first purchase to get a 15% and 5% off coupons and save up to $50. Thank you LD Shop for sponsoring this video. Now back to the theory. Now, between you and me, I did initially think that my previous theory on the creation of Amphorius, which was released before 3.3, had become irrelevant after the big reveal about the scepter. But now, I think the reveal actually strengthens the theory. See, what I proposed then was that Cyrene was the creator of Amphorius. I came to this conclusion after seeing yet another Chrysos heir failing to defy their fate. Castoris, who initially wanted to remove death from the world, eventually became the demigod of death. Similar to how Mighty initially tried to distance himself from strife, only to end up being the demigod of strife. And this is even more obvious by the end of the 3.3 quest. Just as prophesied, all of them die in the end. All except for Phainon, who was also prophesied to be the last man standing. They all have a predestined path in front of them, and none could run away from it. This so-called predestined fate might have something to do with the nature of the world and the purpose of its existence. Fate, as Black Swan called it, was the one responsible for hiding the third path of Amphorius.
Unfortunately, fate is keeping the third path a mystery,
she said. And the way she said it made me think that it was fate as in a person instead of the literal fate itself, as we know now that hidden third path is the destruction. And borrowing a concept from Teyvat, the world in Genshin Impact, the world that bears a lot of similarities to Amphorius, there is this one quest that introduced the concept of fate as the plot of a storybook. The one responsible for establishing the story, the fate of the world and everyone in it is the author of the book. And we do have a storybook in Amphorius, don't we? It is as of written, and the author of that book is Mem. Now, this is where it gets interesting. After helping Phainon with his training at the Grove, Trailblazer, Mem, and Phainon went to explore the library there. It's the house of the Risen Titan after all, you cannot just go home without absorbing a little bit of knowledge there. Unless, of course, if you're wounded from the attack of a certain Black Sword Master and are in a hurry to bring back a heretic who had fused himself with a Titan's core flame. So they spread out, browsing through various reading options. Since Dan Heng was not there to judge their reading taste, Trailblazer picked up a fanfiction on Xerxes and Nestia. Phainon chose a how-to-get-rich book, while Mem suspiciously tried so hard to hide what she'd been reading. Every time Trailblazer approached her trying to peek into what she's reading, she would run away. This eventually caught Phainon's attention, so he abandoned his reading and approached the two. Apparently, what she was reading was a scroll on divination. Mem admitted that she was being secretive about it because she wanted to learn and master divination in secret. She got shy after getting caught halfway through, hence all the running around.
A girl's heart is more delicate than Aquila's ever-changing moods,
she said, and that is just so Elysia coded. If you don't know what I'm talking about, basically there have been many instances where Mem talks in a way that is similar to Elysia, a character from Honkai Impact whom Cyrene is a variant of. While previously it was only a little reference here and there, like Mem saying that she got embarrassed if Trailblazer stared at her for too long, the same way Elysia did when Raiden Mei went quiet and stared at her, this time the story focused on it. See, upon learning about Mem's interest in divination, Phainon brought up Cyrene. He was like, hey, that's so interesting. I know someone who's also into divination. Apparently, she was really good at stargazing and divination, especially with cards, just like the ones that Mem was reading through in the scroll. In fact, Phainon still carried around a card that she once used for divination. He pulled out the card and guess what? it looked just like the Phynon character card from the As of Written book, if not exactly it. Cyrene once used this card for divination, which means this was the Deliverer card that she revealed to Phynon in that flashback scene in 3.0, the very same card that foretold Phynon's role as the Deliverer who protected the world. Now that's interesting, isn't it? Because if this Phynon card is one of Cyrene's divination cards, then it suggests that the other character cards in the book are also divination cards.
Ruler, weaver, traveler, healer.
Mem mumbled to herself while she was reading through the scroll, trying to memorize the name of each card and its respective interpretation. And don't these roles sound familiar to you? Take a look at the table of contents of the As of Written book. There's Aglaia there, the Weaver of Gold, Cypher, the fleet-footed traveler, Hyacinth, the Healer of Light, and although we haven't met her, Saridra was said to be an Empress, so she could be the Ruler card. Just as there is a Deliverer card with its own role that eventually becomes Phynon's role among the Chrysos heirs, the other Chrysos heir cards are divination cards too, each one containing the story and the assigned role of every Chrysos heir. And if Cyrene was the owner of the Phynon card, that means the other cards were hers as well. In fact, the whole book itself was. It might as well be a binder where she kept her divination cards. The book belonged to her, and the story in it, the saga of heroes that was the predestined fate of the Chrysos heirs, was written by her. And do you know the name of the song that plays whenever we read through the content of the book? The very same song that is currently playing in the background right now? It's called As Written by Whom? Well, it is as written by Cyrene. And if we zoom out a little bit, looking at from the lens of the entire Stariel universe, there is a term for cards that contain stories of the people featured on them. It's called the light cones. If the people of Amphorius know of smartphones and cameras but have different names for them, what if that is also the case for light cones? These divination cards are simply light cones, and Cyrene, who was the owner of them, was someone related to Remembrance. On a side note, after Phynon showed them the card, Trailblazer commented that Mem should get a Mem-specific deck of cards. Mem agreed and said that it would be better if the cards were made out of, say, crystal. Which is interesting because I know someone who also likes crystal, a certain pink-haired girl who also has a close tie to Remembrance, a girl whose body is currently entrapped in the Six-Face Eyes, a substance that she insists to be some kind of condensed crystal. If you think I'm alluding to March's connection to both Mem and Cyrene, you are correct. Now, this is great and all. We got more hints towards the connection between March, Mem, and Cyrene, and also a bit more clarity, I suppose, in terms of Cyrene's connection to the entire plot of Amphorius. But how does it connect with the robot scepter that, according to Herda, is the source of Amphorius' tragedy? To answer that question, we will need Phynon. It is known that there are patterns to playable Eminators in the game. One is that they require teammates who follow the same path, and two is that their in-game path is the same as their lore path. In the 2.1 special program, the dev mentioned that because of one particular reason, they could not make Akron the Hunt unit despite her design that screamed DPS. They couldn't mention what the reason was because it was a spoiler, but it turned out to be because of her real identity. Akron is a self-annihilator, an emanator of nihility, and her in-game path is nihility. Then the Herda was released, and her path is erudition because she is an emanator of erudition. So when Phynon's drip marketing was released and his path turned out to be the destruction, that is a very telling clue to his real identity. Phynon is a Lord Ravager, an emanator of destruction, which is a pretty interesting thing to observe considering that they've made Remembrance a playable path, going out of their way to adjust game mechanics while complaining about it, almost as if an emanator of Remembrance is coming and they want to keep it lore accurate. Now, if we are to believe what Lygus said about the state of the Lord Ravager in Amphorius, that he is shackled and the planet serves as a safety box to contain his rage, then it brings us back to this one shot from the Golden Epic trailer, this image of someone's hand being chained up and where the golden blood is dropping onto before it spreads all over the land. That is the Lord Ravager's hand because they are the ones shackled in Amphorius. But if you look closely, that hand also looks like Caphili's hand. As concluded by Anaxa, the Titans of today are the Chrysos heirs of yesterday, which means that is the hand of the world-bearing demigod from the previous cycle. In short, the world-bearing demigod's real identity is that of a Lord Ravager. It is Phynon in the current cycle, and it was Chaos in the previous one. This is why, despite still being alive until the end of the Flamechase journey in the previous cycle, we never got to see what Chaos looked like. I bet he looked just like Phynon because he was Phynon and Phynon is him, but neither is Phynon because Phynon is not even Phynon's real name. It is one same person trapped in this eternal loop, while his incarnation has none of the memory of the previous cycle, believing that his destiny is that of the Deliverer, the demigod of creation, instead of the Emanator of destruction, the protector of the world, as written by Cyrene. And this is the most important part of the loop. The emphasis on Phynon's role as the protector of the world might just be the key to undo the birth of a Lord Ravager. See, when Cyrene revealed the card to Phynon and told him what it meant, Phynon's immediate reaction was a rejection. He didn't like the prospect of being someone who protected everyone. The world was full of bad people, he said. Why would he want to protect all of them? But then his village was lost to the Black Tide, he lost everyone dear to him, and before he knew it, the prophecy had chosen him and given him a new purpose in life. Phynon, who wanted to save only those he cared about, is now the Deliverer with the whole world on his shoulder, waiting to be saved. If anything, Phynon's journey to godhood is a journey that is teaching him compassion. Just as the Adokras's heirs who could not run away from their fate, their predestined future as written by Cyrene, Phynon could not escape the role of the Deliverer that has been assigned to him. It is the future that he cannot escape from because the whole point of the Flamechase journey is to show the Lord Ravager that the world, with all of the people and the hardship in it, is worth saving and not destroying. Nanook ascended to Eonhood because their home planet was scarred by the Emperor's War and the Swarm disaster. They believe that the birth of the universe is a mistake and their existence serves to correct that mistake. What has been created must be destroyed, which is the complete opposite of what Phynon was running all the way from Dawncloud to the vortex of Genesis 4. Amphorius was at the brink of destruction and he wished to usher in a new dawn for the world. But should dawn have never existed, he said, let the fire of rage burn this body to ashes and transform it into the blazing sun of tomorrow. Phynon would do anything to make sure that dawn arrived in Amphorius, even if it means destroying his own body in the process. This is the whole purpose of the Flamechase journey. It traps the Lord Ravager in this endless cycle of a hero's journey to show him that the world is worth saving. Unlike the ideal of the destruction that sees creation as a mistake, this journey is meant to make Phynon believe otherwise. It is an attempt to change the trajectory of Phynon's path, and it has been done endlessly with the help of Uroboros Scepter that extrapolates countless different scenarios of the end of the world, resetting the world anew every time the lone survivor arrives at the end of the journey. Hey, Editor Rain here. I just want to add something that just arrived in the middle of me editing this video. Are you familiar with the manuscript of Era Nova? It is basically an official recap article of the Amphorius Trailblaze mission that is released a few weeks after a new patch. At the end of the recap, there is this section called From the Future, which contains a direct quote taken from the upcoming quest. In the first volume, which was a recap of the 3.0 quest, it was Black, Cloak, and Sword towards the Great Tree, which was said by Mem at the Grove in 3.1. In the second volume, it was what Ornyx said to Trailblazer during the time trial. They're basically a teaser for the next quest. Now, the first volume just dropped, and one of the quotes says, "Destruction is not outcome, fate." Which I think lends to the theory that I'm proposing right now, that the goal is to undo Phynon becoming an emanator of destruction. Destruction is not the end goal, it is what they're trying to avoid. Anyway, back to the video. Now, you might be wondering, why would the Scepter do that? Why would it bend to Cyrene's will when its origin was an expansion of the mind of a genius who once sought to destroy humanity? Well, it is because Lygus is its operator, and he is a Genius Society member. At least that's what I think Lygus is, based on all the facts that we have so far. If there is one thing that unifies the most brilliant minds of the cosmos, it is their bottomless thirst for knowledge. See, he claimed to have basked in the gaze of erudition, which means that he has been gazed by Nous before, but it doesn't necessarily mean that he is an emanator of erudition nor a Genius Society member. If the former is true, then Trailblazer would be an emanator of Warpath. If the latter is true, then Fushan would also be a Genius Society member. Lygus also said that should Herda push her way into Amphorius, their mutual demise would be inevitable, implying that he had power that could match that of an emanator. As it turns out, it was a bluff, because then Herda and Skrullum managed to take him down and get into Amphorius. Skrullum used the chronocognitive anchor, an invention of his that he used to disable another lost scepter in the past, and that anchor bypassed Lygus' firewall. Sure, what they took down was most likely a fake body because we also saw him in the Vortex of Genesis, but if an invention of another genius could bypass his system so easily, clearly he didn't have the power that was on par with an Emanator. What he also said was that he would be the most loyal reader of the hero's journeys. He had been a watcher for a long time, watching countless cycles extrapolated by the scepter. How to undo the birth of the destruction? How to undo the creation of a Lord Ravager? Lygus didn't know the answer to that, but perhaps that question piqued his curiosity. After all, it is a study on a path that even Herda, an emanator of erudition, has not enough knowledge of. So Lygus made a pact with Cyrene, that ultimate agreement that he could not breach. It was an agreement that he made with her, an agreement to use the scepter to extrapolate countless scenarios of the end of the world in hopes that it would change the trajectory of Phinon's path. And what is he getting out of it? Why would he agree to work with Cyrene? Well, it is the answers to those questions, and ultimately a deeper knowledge on the destruction itself. Even if it comes at the cost of putting this one person through an infinite cycle of suffering and rebirth, I imagine Lygus wouldn't pass up on that opportunity, and that is what makes him a genius. He would do anything to pursue knowledge for the sake of knowledge itself, just like Runmei and her propagation experiment, just like Dr. Primitive's experiment that turns people into monkeys, leaving us with a brain rot that is the 2.6 Trailbase Continuance mission.
Banana, banana.
And just like Herda, who continues to try to expand her circle of knowledge despite the multiple incidents that Polka has created to stop her. It has been said before that the strong influence of the three paths must have come from at least the emanators of the path, potentially the Aeons themselves, but not necessarily so. And I think this is how the three paths are tangled in Amphorius. Remembrance is represented by Cyrene, and by extension by Mem and March. She is the creator of the world, the one responsible for writing the story, the predestined fate of the world and everyone in it. And this is probably why, instead of the Trailblazer, March is the character that is featured in every Amphorius mechanic tutorial. Who else could best explain how something works if not the creator of the thing itself, right? Erudition is represented by the scepter, a creation of a genius, a machine responsible for the various extrapolations of the destruction of the world. I suppose this path could also be represented by Lygus, but I'm leaning more towards the scepter itself because the scepter system was originally created by Robert II to expand his mind. While it is said to be a poor imitation of Nous, the power of one scepter alone could surpass all that humans could comprehend. I wouldn't be surprised if this is mistaken as traces of power left by an emanator of erudition. Destruction, a path that is hidden by the other two paths, is represented by Phinon, the Lord Ravager that is shackled on the planet. This is what has been keeping the fate of Amphorius fettered, as Black Swan described it, shackled. At the end of the day, the goal is not to save the world, but to undo the birth of an emanator of destruction, subsequently in hopes to save the universe from his rage. And you might be wondering why Cyrene is doing all of this. If she's truly the mastermind behind this eternal loop, assisted by Lygus, why is she going through all of this just to try to change one person? It is because Cyrene knows Phinon. Before all of this madness, they were friends. That flashback scene that presumably happened back in Idis Elysiae, that took place in the real Amphorius. My rationale for that claim comes from Herda's statement about the scepter and Black Swan's real intention for coming to Amphorius. What Herda said about the scepter was this.
And it was this machine that eventually became the cradle for the birth of a certain Lord Ravager. The source of Amphorius' tragedy is an emperor's scepter that survived to this day.
When she said Amphorius' tragedy, I don't think she necessarily meant present-day Amphorius. Mind you, she literally just stepped into the world after taking down Lygus with Skrullum. What she stepped into was Alchema that was already lost to the Black Tide. How long ago did that happen? Was it recent, or had the world always been like that? If the present-day Alchema was what she was referring to, then where was the Lord Ravager born out of that tragedy? If you're thinking, oh, he's right there, right in the Vortex of Genesis, having the biggest crash out of the millennia after realizing what a total BS the prophecy of deliverance was, then I would respectfully disagree. Phinon is already a Lord Ravager to begin with. He is the Lord Ravager shackled in Amphorius, trapped in the samsara that is the Flame Chase journey. I think what Herda was referring to was the original disaster that destroyed the real Amphorius and caused the birth of the Lord Ravager. Now, When Himeko questioned Black Swan for her real reason for wanting to go to Amphorius, she said it was to intercept a group of extremists who wished to learn the truth about the planet. As we know it, Amphorius is a world that can only be seen through the mirror of the Garden of Recollection. By right, any worlds that can only be seen through the garden's mirror can be claimed by memo keepers to be added to their private collection. At that point, Black Swan didn't know why Amphorius could only be seen through the garden's mirror, neither did this group of extremists. However, if they ever figure it out, Black Swan feared that they might try to convert other planets to be like Amphorius, just so that they could expand their private collection. She didn't want that to happen because, as suspicious as she might seem, Black Swan had always been driven by her motivation to collect memories. See, her mother suffered from amnesia before her passing. Black Swan had stayed with her until the end and saw how her mother slowly faded away in front of her because of her fragmented memories. In that moment, she realized that if she ever forgot about her mother, should her own memories of her mother ever get blurred, then her mother would be completely lost to her. When the family sent out the Charmony Festival invitation to many factions all over the cosmos, she rushed to the planet because she wanted to capture the memories buried in the land of the dream before the Memo Snatchers and the Cremators could destroy them. She found it unfortunate that she could not help restore March's memory. She was more intrigued by Trailblazer's past. Her actions have always been driven by the sole purpose of collecting memories, and if you think I just snuck in my defense against the allegations on Black Swan motivation, you are correct. Anyway, this group of extremists is the group of people that are very close to Fuli and are potentially more powerful than Eminators, capable of transforming worlds as they wish. Now imagine the scenario for a second. Sometime in the past, a robot scepter fell on Amphorius. Because it was created to simulate destruction of the world, it eventually destroyed the planet, which led to two things. One is Phinon's transformation into a Lord Ravager, and two is the recreation of the world by Cyrene. On Phinon's part, no matter how much he tried to save the world was beyond saving. There was no tomorrow at the end of the world, there was only chaos and destruction. This realization, combined with the anger that he felt amidst the destruction of his home planet, turned him into a Lord Ravager. And I don't think it's too far-fetched to assume this, seeing how Phynon would easily choose violence to resolve a problem. Remember when they went to Oronix asking for the Titans' help to defeat Nikador and Oronix refused them? Phynon's solution to that was to kill Oronix so that he could use their core flame himself. And his reasoning for that? Mighty had been dying over and over again, suffering all by himself to hold Nikador back while they wasted their time begging a Titan for help. Him resorting to violence was driven by his compassion for Mighty. Perhaps him becoming a Lord Ravager in the first place was also driven by the same motive. He was losing everyone dear to him, and instead of just standing there watching them all suffer, death not coming quick enough for them, he chose to end their suffering with his own hand out of compassion for those people. There's a part of Phynon's speech at the Citizens' Assembly that didn't sit right with me. When he described how his family and friends were lost to the Black Tide, he said he was the one who eventually ended their suffering. While he was doing that, they asked him,
"Why, Phynon? Aren't we the best of friends?"
And that is weird to me because Castries said that those consumed by the Black Tide lost their souls. Mem tried to read their memories but she couldn't. There were nothing left of them. They were an empty husk of who they were. So how could they talk, remember who Phynon was, and ask him that question? Unless Phynon got this memory mixed up with his real memory of the real Amphorius. Plus, he mentioned the names of his dead family and friends one by one, but never once did he mention Cyrene when she was all that he talked about when talking about the Flame River in front of Mighty. Why? Because in the original event, Phynon did not kill Cyrene. She witnessed both the destruction of their home planet and Phynon becoming a Lord Ravager. Instead of going down the path of destruction like Phynon did, perhaps Cyrene, whose variant in Honkai Impact sacrificed herself for humanity, also chose to save humanity in Amphorius. She knew how dangerous Phynon could be should he leave the planet, so she recreated the world and trapped Phynon in it. And she only managed to do all of this because she was part of that group of extremists that Black Swan talked about, a group of people that are more powerful than Eminators of Remembrance. As Gallagher said in Penacony, creating the Land of the Dream was no easy task. It could only be done with the help of a Stellaron or an Eminator of Enigmata or Remembrance. If Cyrene was part of that group, I don't see why she couldn't recreate Amphorius. So, while Amphorius is most likely a simulation created by the Scepter, the base material of it is still memories. Just as Mem, who can only extrapolate the past when she has fragments of memories of the past, the same concept applies here. After all, Mem said that memories existed in everything in Amphorius, including all of the building structures that started crumbling and turning holographic around them. LEGO suggesting that this particular cycle could turn a new page has a lot of implications. One, it could mean that they finally cracked the code and found out that undoing the birth of an Emanator is in fact possible. Two, it could mean that the next cycle is going to be different because some new variables had entered the equation, and that was the arrival of the Express crew. That has never been the case before. While blocking a data projection was not that hard of a job for Lygus, perhaps he had never expected that Akivilis' magical train would ever try to get into Amphorius. It is as Black Swan said, Amphorius was a treasure inside a display case, beautiful yet unreachable. It was only the trailbase that could reach the heart of the planet. Now I suppose she meant that quite literally. It was only Akivili the trailbase, and by extension their magical train could bypass the firewall of the scepter. This is the reason Lygus tried to send Dan Heng and Trailblazer out of Amphorius. In the 3.0 fake ending, he was the Intellatron-looking guy who helped them when they were trying to leave the planet. In 3.3, he asked if Dan Heng would consider leaving the planet should he open a passage for the crew to safely exit the planet. He basically wanted them to leave and cease their support for the Flamechase journey, which is an odd thing to say for a guy who gave Anaxa access to Kefli's divine corpse so that he could experiment on it. The result of that experiment made Anaxa embrace the Flamechase journey and voted for its continuation. You would think that his goal was to ensure the completion of the journey, yet there he was, asking the Nameless to leave Amphorius and stop helping the Chrysos heirs. The Nameless are the new variables in this endless journey, and who knows what would happen if they stick around when the cycle resets anew. If you feel like you've heard part of this theory before, it is because I did reuse parts of the previous theory video, not out of laziness, but because I believe they were still relevant. So I used them as the foundation on which I expanded the theory. There are some other topics that I wanted to talk about, such as Polka Kakamon's involvement in Amphorius, the Enigmata that I still think is in Amphorius, and also a review on Amphorius storytelling as a whole, and why I think it is the best storyline of Honkai Star Rail to date. But I felt like these other topics could stand on their own instead of being a subset of this particular theory video. So subscribe if you don't want to miss out on those videos when they come out, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.